My name is Harold Whitmore, and I'm about to tell you how my own children threw me away like garbage, only to discover they had just discarded $47 million. But this story isn't just about money. It's about how greed can blind people to what really matters, and how sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of justice. I spent 43 years building Whitmore Industries, from a small manufacturing shop in Detroit to a multi-million-dollar company. 43 years of 16-hour days, missed birthdays, and sacrificed weekends. I told myself I was doing it all for my family, for my wife Eleanor, and for our 2 children, Marcus and Victoria. Eleanor understood the sacrifices. She knew that every late night at the office, every missed dinner, was an investment in our future. But the kids, they only saw the results, never the work. They grew up in a world of private schools, expensive vacations, and unlimited credit cards. They never learned the value of $1 because they never had to earn one. When Eleanor died of cancer 3 years ago, something inside me broke. Not just my heart, though that shattered completely, but my drive, my purpose. What was the point of building an empire if the person you built it for was gone? Marcus was 32 then, working as a consultant for companies that paid him ridiculous amounts of money just because he was my son. Victoria was 29, married to a hedge fund manager named Bradley, spending her days at charity galas and spa appointments. Neither of them had ever worked a real job in their lives. After Eleanor's funeral, I made a decision that would change everything. I sold Whitmore Industries for $87 million. But here's what nobody knew. Not my children, not my lawyers, not even my accountant. I didn't put that money in my regular accounts. Instead, I invested every single penny in stocks. You see, while my children were busy spending money they hadn't earned, I was quietly studying the market. I had always been good with numbers, good at seeing patterns others missed. That's how I built my company in the first place. So I took that $87 million and played the stock market like a chess game. Apple in 2003, when everyone thought they were finished. Amazon, when people said online shopping would never work. Tesla, when everyone called Elon Musk crazy. Google, before they went public. Netflix, when they were still mailing DVDs. I bought low, held tight, and watched my investments grow. By 2019, my portfolio was worth $47 million. But my children had no idea. As far as they knew, I was just a retired old man living off Social Security and a small pension. I lived modestly, drove an old car, shopped at discount stores. I wanted to see who my children really were when they thought I had nothing left to give them. The answer broke my heart. Marcus would visit maybe once a month, always with his hand out. Dad, I need $20,000 for a business opportunity. Dad, can you help with the down payment on a new house? Dad, my credit cards are maxed out again. He never asked how I was doing, never asked about my health, never just came to spend time with his old man. Victoria was even worse. She'd show up with her designer handbags and her fake smile, talking about how concerned she was about me living alone. But her concern always came with a price tag. Daddy, Bradley's firm is having some cash flow issues. Daddy, I saw this beautiful necklace that would mean so much to me. Daddy, we really need help with the country club membership fees. They saw me as an ATM, nothing more. And when I started saying no to their constant requests for money, their visits became less frequent. Then they stopped altogether. That's when my health started declining. At 78, I was dealing with high blood pressure, diabetes, and the early signs of arthritis. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make daily tasks more difficult. I mentioned this to Marcus during one of his rare phone calls. His response, "Dad, maybe it's time you considered assisted living. You know, somewhere with professional care." I knew what he really meant. He wanted me out of the house so he could sell it. He wanted me tucked away somewhere where I wouldn't be a burden, where he wouldn't have to pretend to care about me anymore. But I wasn't ready to give up my independence. I hired a part-time housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, who helped with cleaning and cooking. I installed safety rails in the bathroom and bought one of those medical alert necklaces. I was managing just fine on my own. That wasn't good enough for my children. The intervention happened on a Tuesday morning in October. I was having my coffee and reading the financial section, checking on my investments, though they didn't know that when Marcus and Victoria showed up unannounced, they had that look on their faces, the one that meant they'd been planning something behind my back. "Dad, we need to talk," Victoria said, settling into Eleanor's favorite chair without being invited. She was wearing a coat that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Marcus sat across from me, pulling out a folder full of papers. "We've been doing some research, and we found this great place called Sunset Manor. It's a retirement community with full-time medical staff, activities, meals provided. You'd love it there." I set down my coffee cup slowly. "I'm not interested in moving to a retirement home." "Dad, be reasonable," Victoria said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "You're almost 80 years old. What if you fall and no one finds you for hours? What if you forget to take your medication? What if there's a fire? What if, I repeated. "I'm not an invalid. I'm managing perfectly well on my own." Marcus leaned forward, and I could see the frustration in his eyes. "Dad, you're being stubborn. We're trying to help you here. This place has everything you need. And honestly, maintaining this big house is becoming expensive. The property taxes alone are killing us." There it was, the truth. It wasn't about my safety or my health. It was about money. They wanted to sell the house, and they couldn't do that while I was living in it. "The house isn't costing you anything," I said quietly. "I pay all the bills." "But it's not sustainable long-term," Victoria chimed in. "And frankly, Dad, you're not getting any younger. We need to plan for the future. For your future." They had it all figured out. They'd already toured Sunset Manor, already spoken to the administrators, already filled out half the paperwork. All I had to do was sign on the dotted line and let them handle everything. "And what about my things?" I asked. 40 years of memories in this house, your mother's garden, the workshop where I taught you both how to use tools." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "We'll help you pack the important stuff. The rest can be donated or sold." "Dad, you don't need all this space anymore. You don't need all this stuff." I looked around the living room where Eleanor and I had raised our children, where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where we'd held each other during the hard times. To them, it was just stuff. To me, it was a lifetime. "I need time to think about this," I said. "Dad, we've already put down a deposit," Victoria said. "They're holding a room for you, but only until the end of the week. These places have waiting lists. You put down a deposit without asking me. We knew you'd overthink it," Marcus said. "Sometimes you just have to rip the band-aid off. Trust us, Dad. This is what's best for everyone. Best for everyone. Not best for me." best for them. I spent the next 3 days in that house, walking through rooms filled with memories they wanted to sell off. I sat in Eleanor's chair and remembered the nights we'd spent planning our future. I stood in the kitchen with... She'd taught Victoria how to bake cookies, back when Victoria still cared about things that didn't cost money. I went into the garage, where I'd shown Marcus how to change oil and fix engines, back when he still looked up to me. Those memories were worth more than any amount of money. But my children couldn't see that. All they saw were dollar signs and inconvenience. On Friday, they came back for my answer. "I'll go," I said quietly. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. Victoria actually smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. Not because she was happy I'd be safe and cared for, but because she was happy to finally get what she wanted. "You're making the right choice, Dad," Marcus said, already pulling out his phone to call the moving company he'd apparently already booked. "You'll see, this is going to be great for you." Sunset Manor was exactly what you'd expect from a place that charged $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment with institutional furniture and cafeteria food. The staff was friendly enough, but they had that professional cheerfulness that never quite reached their eyes. The other residents were nice people, but most of them were dealing with serious health issues or memory problems. I was one of the youngest, healthiest people there. My room was clean and functional, but it wasn't home. It had a hospital bed, a small dresser, a tiny bathroom, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. I was allowed to bring some personal items, but space was limited. Most of my life had to be left behind. The hardest part wasn't the institutional food or the scheduled activities, or the way the staff talked to us like we were children. The hardest part was the silence from my own children. Marcus called once, the first week, to ask how I was settling in. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Victoria sent a card, one of those generic thinking of you cards you buy in bulk. After that, nothing. I'd been at Sunset Manor for 3 weeks when I met Dorothy Kellerman. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and had been living there for 2 years since her son moved her from California. We started eating meals together, playing cards in the evening, and sharing stories about our lives. "My son visits every few months," she told me one afternoon as we sat in the common room. "Always brings his new girlfriend. He's been divorced 3 times. Stays for maybe an hour, asks if I need anything, then disappears again. I think he feels guilty, but not guilty enough to actually spend time with me. At least he visits." I said, "My kids haven't been here once since they dropped me off." Dorothy studied my face with those wise old eyes. "You know what I've learned in my 82 years. Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. And honey, if your blood family isn't showing up, maybe it's time to find your real family." She was right, of course. The staff at Sunset Manor treated me with more kindness and respect than my own children had shown me in years. My table mates at dinner asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. The activities coordinator, a young woman named Jessica, always made sure I felt included in the social events. But I still missed my old life. I missed my house, my independence, my privacy. I missed being able to eat what I wanted when I wanted it. I missed my workshop and my garden and the quiet mornings with my coffee and newspaper. Most of all, I missed feeling like I mattered to someone. That's when I started talking to the other residents about my past. Not the whole truth. I still kept my financial situation private, but stories about building my company, about the early days with Eleanor, about the challenges and triumphs of running a business. "You must have done pretty well for yourself," said Frank Morrison, a retired teacher who'd become one of my closest friends at Sunset Manor. "Building a company from scratch, that's no small feat." "I did okay," I said modestly. "Nothing spectacular. But Eleanor and I were comfortable." "What happened to the business?" asked Agnes Palmer, a former nurse who always sat with us during our afternoon card games. "I sold it when Eleanor got sick. Wanted to spend more time with her." I paused, remembering those final months. Best decision I ever made. Money can't buy you more time with the people you love. "So what did you do with the money from the sale?" Frank asked. "If you don't mind me asking." I hesitated. These people had become my friends, but I still wasn't ready to reveal the whole truth. "I invested it," I said simply. "Figured I'd let it grow for my children's inheritance." What I didn't tell them was that I checked my portfolio every day on the tablet Jessica had helped me set up. What I didn't tell them was that my investments were performing better than I'd ever imagined. What I didn't tell them was that I was watching my net worth climb toward $50 million while my children thought I was just another broke old man warehoused in a nursing home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, while my own children, the ones who stood to inherit everything, couldn't be bothered to visit or even call. That irony became even more bitter when I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I was walking back to my room after dinner when I heard familiar voices coming from the visitors' lounge. Marcus and Victoria were there, talking in hushed tones with someone I didn't recognize. I stopped just outside the doorway, hidden by a large potted plant. "So how long do these things usually take?" the stranger was asking. "Depends on a lot of factors," Victoria replied. "His health, his age, his will to live. Could be months, could be years. The important thing is that he's comfortable and well cared for," Marcus added, though his tone suggested he was reading from a script. "We want what's best for Dad." "Of course," the stranger said. "And you're sure about the financial situation? No hidden assets, no surprise accounts." My blood ran cold. They were talking to someone about my finances. But who? "We've been through everything," Victoria said. "The house sale will cover his care here for maybe 18 months, 2 years at most. After that, ... She shrugged. "Well, hopefully it won't come to that. And there's no life insurance." "A small policy," Marcus said. "Maybe 50,000. Enough to cover funeral expenses and settle any outstanding debts." I realized they were talking to an estate planner or maybe a lawyer. They were planning for my death, calculating how much money they'd inherit, figuring out how to maximize their profits from my demise. But they had no idea what they were talking about. The house sale had netted them about $400,000 after paying off the mortgage and settling Eleanor's medical bills. They thought that was all I had. They had no clue about the $47 million sitting in my investment accounts. "What about the monthly costs here?" the stranger asked. $3,000 a month, Victoria said. Plus extra fees for medications, medical care, activities. It adds up fast. "We're hoping he qualifies for Medicaid eventually," Marcus added. "Once his assets are depleted." They wanted me to go broke. They wanted me to spend down my savings, the savings they didn't know existed, so that the government would pay for my care. They were literally planning for me to become destitute. I slipped away before they could see me, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. These were my children, the babies I'd held in my arms, the toddlers I'd taught to walk, the teenagers I'd supported through their mistakes and failures, and they were sitting in a nursing home lobby, planning how to profit from my death. That night, I lay in my narrow hospital bed and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to rewrite my will the next morning. I called my lawyer, Thomas Brennan. Tom had been handling my legal affairs for over 20 years. He'd helped me incorporate my business, had drawn up Eleanor's will, had handled the sale of the company. He was one of the few people who knew about my investment portfolio. "Harold," he said when his secretary put me through, "how are you settling in at the retirement home?" "It's fine, Tom. Listen, I need to make some changes to my will." There was a pause, of course. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" "I want to disinherit Marcus and Victoria completely." Another pause, longer this time. "Harold, that's a pretty drastic step. Are you sure you want to do this? Maybe we should meet in person to discuss it." "I'm very sure. And yes, I'd like to meet." "Can you come to Sunset Manor tomorrow?" "Absolutely." "Harold, can I ask what brought this on? Last time we spoke, you were planning to leave everything to the kids." I told him about the conversation I'd overheard about their complete abandonment of me since moving me to the nursing home, about their obvious eagerness for me to die so they could inherit my money. "They don't even know about the investment portfolio," I said. "They think I'm broke. They're literally waiting for me to die so they can collect a $50,000 life insurance policy." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "So who do you want to leave everything to instead?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with all night. I didn't have any other family. Eleanor had been an only child, and my parents had died years ago. I had a few distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in decades. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Maybe a charity. Maybe the staff here who actually treat me like a human being. I need to think about it." "Well, we have time," Tom said. "Let me draft something up and we can discuss the options when I see you tomorrow." But, as it turned out, we didn't have as much time as we thought. That afternoon, I was in the common room playing chess with Frank, when Jessica, the activities coordinator, approached our table with a concerned look on her face. "Mr. Whitmore, there are some people here to see you. They say they're from the state health department." My stomach dropped. I followed Jessica to the visitors' lounge, where two official-looking people in suits were waiting with clipboards and briefcases. "Mr. Whitmore," the woman said, standing up as I entered. "I'm Sarah Chen from the Department of Health Services, and this is my colleague, David Rodriguez. We're here to conduct a routine evaluation of your care and living situation." I sat down slowly, my mind racing. This wasn't routine. Someone had called them. "We understand you were recently moved here by your family," Mr. Rodriguez said, consulting his clipboard. "How are you finding the adjustment?" "It's fine," I said carefully. "Are you happy with the level of care you're receiving?" Ms. Chen asked. "Do you feel safe here? Do you have any concerns about the facility or the staff?" "No concerns," I said. "Everyone here has been very kind to me." They asked more questions about my health, my finances, my family situation. Standard questions, but I could tell they were building up to something. "Mr. Whitmore," Ms. Chen said, "finally, we've received some information suggesting that you may not have been fully informed about your financial situation when you made the decision to move here. Is that accurate?" My blood ran cold. "What kind of information?" "We understand that your children may have misrepresented your assets in order to expedite your placement here," Mr. Rodriguez said. We also understand that you may have significant financial resources that weren't disclosed during the admission process. Someone had told them about my money. But who? The only people who knew were Tom Brennan and ... We're required to investigate any allegations of elder financial abuse, Ms. Chen continued. If your children moved you here under false pretenses, or if they're managing your finances without your consent, that's a serious matter. I stared at them, my mind reeling. Elder financial abuse. Is that what this was? I'm not sure I understand, I said slowly. My children didn't force me to move here. It was my decision. But was it an informed decision? Mr. Rodriguez asked. Did you have access to complete information about your financial situation when you made that choice? The truth was, no. My children had pressured me, had made me feel like I had no other options, had convinced me that I couldn't afford to stay in my own home. They'd made me believe I was a burden, that moving to Sunset Manor was the only responsible choice. But they'd done all of that without knowing about my real financial situation. They thought they were manipulating a poor old man. They had no idea they were manipulating a millionaire. I think, I said carefully, I need to speak with my lawyer before I answer any more questions. Ms. Chen nodded. That's your right, of course, but Mr. Whitmore, if you are the victim of financial abuse, we can help you. We can investigate your children's handling of your affairs. We can help you regain control of your assets. After they left, I sat in my room and tried to process what had just happened. Someone had reported my children for elder abuse. Someone knew about my money and had connected the dots. The only person it could be was Tom Brennan. He must have been so disturbed by what I'd told him about Marcus and Victoria that he'd contacted the authorities. I called him immediately. Tom, did you report my children to the state? Harold, I had to. What they did to you, pressuring you to move into that facility while hiding your true financial situation from you. That's textbook elder abuse. I couldn't just sit on that information. But they don't know about the money, I protested. They think I'm broke. That doesn't matter. They manipulated you based on false information. They made you believe you had no choice but to move into assisted living. They isolated you from your support system and your independence. The fact that they don't know about your investments doesn't change the fact that what they did was wrong. Was right, of course. But I wasn't sure I was ready for the chaos that was about to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, Marcus and Victoria showed up at Sunset Manor in a panic. I was in the dining room having breakfast when Jessica came to get me. Your children are here, she said quietly. They seem ... upset. I found them in the visitors' lounge, both of them pacing and talking rapidly on their phones. When they saw me, they hung up immediately. Dad, what the hell is going on? Marcus demanded. We just got a call from some state investigators saying, we're being investigated for elder abuse. Elder abuse. Do you have any idea how serious that is? Daddy, please tell us you didn't file some kind of complaint against us, Victoria said, her voice shaking. This could ruin Marcus's business. It could ruin Bradley's career. We could lose everything. I sat down slowly, looking at my children, really looking at them for the first time in months. They weren't concerned about me. They weren't worried about my well-being or my happiness. They were worried about themselves, about their reputations, about their money. I didn't file any complaint, I said truthfully. Then who did? Marcus asked. These people don't just investigate random families for no reason. Maybe, I said quietly, Someone noticed that you moved your father into a nursing home and then disappeared from his life completely. We didn't disappear, Victoria protested. We've been busy. We have our own lives, our own responsibilities. When was the last time either of you visited me? I asked. They looked at each other, neither wanting to answer. When was the last time either of you called me just to see how I was doing? More silence. When was the last time either of you treated me like I was your father instead of an inconvenience you needed to manage? Dad, that's not fair, Marcus said. We put you in a good place. We made sure you were safe and cared for. We did what we thought was best. You did what was best for you, I said. You wanted me out of the house so you could sell it. You wanted me tucked away somewhere where you wouldn't have to think about me anymore. That's not true, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Tell me, Victoria, what's my favorite food? What medications am I taking? What time do I usually go to bed? Do you know anything about my life here? She stared at me, unable to answer. Marcus, do you know who my friends are here? Do you know what activities I participate in? Do you know if I'm happy or sad or lonely? He looked away. You don't know anything about my life because you don't care about my life. You care about my death. You care about what you'll inherit when I'm gone. Dad, please, Victoria said, tears starting to form in her eyes. We love you. We've always loved you. No, I said, standing up. You love my money. You've never loved me. I walked away from them, leaving them sitting in that visitor's lounge with their shock and their guilt and their fear of being investigated. But I wasn't done, not even close. That afternoon, Tom Brennan arrived with the new will I'd requested. We met in the facility's small conference room, away from prying eyes and ears. I've drafted the changes you requested, he said, spreading the documents across the table. But Harold, I want you to think carefully about this. Disinheriting your children completely. That's a decision you can't take back. I've thought about nothing else for weeks, I said. They made their choice when they abandoned me here. Now I'm making mine. The new will was simple and devastating. Marcus and Victoria would inherit nothing. Not a penny, not a photograph, not a piece of jewelry that had belonged to their mother. Everything, the entire $47 million portfolio, would go to charity. Specifically, it would go to establish the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation for Elder Care, dedicated to improving conditions in nursing homes and assisted living facilities across the country. The foundation would also provide financial assistance to elderly people who couldn't afford quality care, ensuring that no one would have to choose between dignity and affordability in their final years. There's one more thing I want to add, I told Tom as I reviewed the documents. What's that? I want to include a letter. Something that will be read aloud when the will is probated. I want Marcus and Victoria to understand exactly why they're getting nothing. Tom nodded. I can arrange that. I spent the next hour writing that letter, pouring out years of disappointment and heartbreak onto paper. I wrote about the children. They used to be, before money and status corrupted them. I wrote about their mother and how ashamed she would be of what they'd become. I wrote about the values Eleanor and I had tried to instill in them and how completely they'd rejected those values, but mostly I wrote about love. About how love isn't something you can buy or inherit or demand. It's something you earn through your actions, through your presence, through your willingness to put someone else's needs before your own. Your mother and I gave you everything. I wrote, we gave you opportunities, education, financial security, and most importantly, we gave you love. But you never learned to give love back. You learned to take, to demand, to expect. You learned that people exist to serve your needs, not the other way around. When I needed you most, when I was grieving your mother and struggling with my health, you saw me as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. You moved me into this facility not because you thought it was best for me, but because it was most convenient for you. You haven't visited me once since you dropped me off here. You haven't called to check on my well-being. You haven't asked about my friends or my activities or my happiness. You've treated me like I'm already dead, just waiting for the paperwork to make it official, so I'm granting your wish. As far as you're concerned, I am dead, and dead men don't leave inheritances to children who never loved them. I signed the will and the letter, and Tom witnessed both documents. It was done. Marcus and Victoria had no idea that they'd just lost $47 million. But the universe wasn't finished with its twisted sense of justice 2 days later. I was in the common room reading when I overheard Agnes Palmer talking to her daughter on the phone. Agnes was one of my closest friends at Sunset Manor, a retired nurse who'd been living there for 6 months since breaking her hip. "No, honey, I'm fine," she was saying. "The physical therapy is going well, and I should be able to move back to my apartment next month." "What? No, I don't need any money. I told you, the insurance is covering everything, ... Sweetheart, you don't need to worry about me. Save your money for your own family." When she hung up, I could see tears in her eyes. "Everything okay, Agnes?" I asked. She wiped her eyes and smiled. "Oh, you know how it is. My daughter wants to help with the medical bills, but she's got 3 kids and a mortgage. I keep telling her I'm fine, but the truth is, ... double quotes, she lowered her voice. The truth is, I'm going to lose my apartment. The medical bills are more than my insurance covers, and I don't have enough savings to make up the difference." My heart broke for her. Agnes was one of the kindest, most generous people I'd ever met. She'd been a nurse for 40 years, dedicating her life to caring for others. She'd raised 3 children as a single mother after her husband died in Vietnam. She'd never asked for anything from anyone, always giving more than she received. And now she was going to lose her home because she couldn't afford her medical bills. "Agnes," I said quietly, "what if I told you I might be able to help?" She looked at me with surprise. "Harold, that's sweet of you, but I know you're in the same boat as the rest of us. Fixed income, limited resources. I wouldn't take your money even if you had it to spare." "But what if I did have it to spare?" She studied my face, trying to read my expression. "What are you saying?" I made a decision that felt more right than anything I'd done in years. "Agnes, I need to tell you something, but I need you to promise me you'll keep it between us for now." She nodded, leaning closer. "I'm not broke," I whispered. "I have money, a lot of money, and I want to help you." Her eyes widened. "Harold, what are you talking about?" I told her everything. About selling my company, about my investments, about my children's greed and abandonment, about the new will I'd just signed. I told her about the $47 million that Marcus and Victoria didn't know existed. When I finished, Agnes was staring at me in shock. "You're serious?" she said finally. "Dead serious. And Agnes, I want to pay your medical bills. I want to make sure you can keep your apartment. I want to help you the way my own children should have helped me." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "Harold, I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's not too much," I said firmly. "It's not nearly enough. You've shown me more kindness the past few months than my own children have shown me in years. You've been the family I needed when my real family abandoned me. That's when I realized. I walked away from them, leaving them sitting in that visitor's lounge with their shock and their guilt and their fear of being investigated. But I wasn't done, not even close. That afternoon, Tom Brennan arrived with the new will I'd requested. We met in the facility's small conference room, away from prying eyes and ears. "I've drafted the changes you requested," he said, spreading the documents across the table. "But Harold, I want you to think carefully about this. Disinheriting your children completely. That's a decision you can't take back." "I've thought about nothing else for weeks," I said. "They made their choice when they abandoned me here. Now I'm making mine." The new will was simple and devastating. Marcus and Victoria would inherit nothing. Not a penny, not a photograph, not a piece of jewelry that had belonged to their mother. Everything, the entire $47 million portfolio, would go to charity. Specifically, it would go to establish the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation for Elder Care, dedicated to improving conditions in nursing homes and assisted living facilities across the country. The foundation would also provide financial assistance to elderly people who couldn't afford quality care, ensuring that no one would have to choose between dignity and affordability in their final years. "There's one more thing I want to add," I told Tom as I reviewed the documents. "What's that?" "I want to include a letter. Something that will be read aloud when the will is probated. I want Marcus and Victoria to understand exactly why they're getting nothing." Tom nodded. "I can arrange that." I spent the next hour writing that letter, pouring out years of disappointment and heartbreak onto paper. I wrote about the children. They used to be, before money and status corrupted them. I wrote about their mother and how ashamed she would be of what they'd become. I wrote about the values Eleanor and I had tried to instill in them and how completely they'd rejected those values, but mostly I wrote about love. About how love isn't something you can buy or inherit or demand. It's something you earn through your actions, through your presence, through your willingness to. I wasn't surprised. Marcus and Victoria had always been careless with money, especially when they thought it was unlimited. "We're prepared to file formal charges," Mr. Rodriguez added. "Financial exploitation of an elderly person, fraudulent misrepresentation, possibly even kidnapping if we can prove you were moved here against your will." "I wasn't moved here against my will," I said. "I was manipulated and pressured, but ultimately I made the choice. Manipulation and pressure can constitute coercion under the law," Ms. Chen explained, "especially when the manipulation involves false information about your financial situation. But I wasn't interested in seeing my children go to prison. I was interested in something much more satisfying. I wanted them to understand what they'd lost. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. I was having dinner with my usual group, Agnes, Frank, Dorothy, and James, when Jessica approached our table with a concerned expression. "Mr. Whitmore, your son and daughter are here. They're asking to speak with you privately. They seem ... agitated." I excused myself and walked to the visitors' lounge, where Marcus and Victoria were waiting. They both looked terrible. Marcus had dark circles under his eyes, and Victoria's usually perfect hair was disheveled. "Dad, we need to talk," Marcus said without preamble. "This investigation is destroying our lives. My business is falling apart because clients don't want to work with someone who's been accused of elder abuse. Victoria's husband is talking about divorce because the scandal is affecting his career. We're begging you," Victoria added, her voice breaking. Please tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them we love you and we were just trying to help." I looked at my children, really looked at them, and for a moment I saw the babies they used to be. The toddlers who used to run to me when I came home from work. The children who used to sit on my lap while I read them bedtime stories. But then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard. The one where they'd discussed my death like a business transaction. I remembered the months of abandonment, the complete lack of interest in my well-being, the way they'd treated me like a burden to be managed rather than a person to be loved. "I'll make you a deal," I said quietly. They both leaned forward eagerly. "I'll tell the investigators that I don't want to pursue charges against you. I'll tell them that moving here was my choice and that I don't consider myself a victim of abuse." Relief flooded their faces. "But," I continued, "in exchange, I want something from you." "Anything," Marcus said quickly. "Whatever you want. I want you to visit me. Really visit me. Not just show up and ask if I need anything, but actually spend time with me. I want you to have dinner with me once a week. I want you to meet my friends here. I want you to ask about my life and actually listen to the answers." They exchanged glances. "Dad, of course," Victoria said. "We should have been doing that all along. We're sorry we haven't been better about visiting. I want you to call me twice a week just to talk. Not because you need something, not because there's a crisis, but just to check in, to ask how I'm doing and actually care about the answer." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "We can do that, and I want you to include me in your lives. I want to know about your work, your relationships, your hopes and dreams. I want to feel like I'm still your father, not just some old man you're warehousing until I die." "Dad, you are our father," Victoria said, tears starting to form. "We love you. We've always loved you." I studied their faces, trying to determine if they meant it, or if they were just saying what they thought I wanted to hear. "Prove it," I said finally. Over the next month, Marcus and Victoria kept their word. Marcus came for dinner every Tuesday, and Victoria visited every Friday. They called me twice a week, just to chat. They met my friends and actually seemed to enjoy spending time with them. They asked about my activities, my health, my feelings about living at Sunset Manor. For the first time in years, I felt like I had children again. But I also noticed something else. They were both struggling financially more than they'd let on. Marcus's consulting business was indeed falling apart. Partly because of the investigation, but mostly because he'd never been very good at it. He'd been coasting on his connection to me for years, and without that safety net, he was floundering. Victoria's marriage was in trouble, and not just because of the scandal. Bradley had been having an affair, and Victoria was facing the possibility of a messy, expensive divorce. She'd never worked a real job in her life, and the prospect of supporting herself was terrifying. They were both facing the reality that they might actually have to earn their own money for the first time in their adult lives. I found myself feeling sorry for them, which surprised me. Despite everything they'd done, despite the years of neglect and manipulation, they were still my children, and they were struggling. That's when I made another decision that would change everything. I called Tom Brennan and asked him to come to Sunset Manor for another meeting. "I want to change my will again," I told him. He raised an eyebrow. "Harold, you just rewrote it a month ago. Are you sure you want to keep making changes?" "I'm sure. I want to leave something to Marcus and Victoria after all. How much are we talking about?" $1 million each. Tom stared at me. That's a significant change from leaving them nothing. What brought this on? I told him about their visits, about the effort they'd been making to rebuild our relationship, about their financial struggles and personal problems. They're not the people I raised them to be, I said, but maybe they can still become those people. Maybe they just needed to lose everything to remember what really matters. And if they revert to their old behavior once they inherit the money, then they'll have proven that I was right to disinherit them in the first place. But I want to give them a chance to prove me wrong. Tom drafted the new will, leaving $2 million to my children and $45 million to the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation. It was still a massive inheritance for Marcus and Victoria, but it was also a test. Would they be grateful for what they received, or would they be angry about what they didn't get? I didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 months later, I suffered a massive heart attack while playing chess with Frank in the common room. The last thing I remember was Frank calling for help and the sound of sirens in the distance. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, surrounded by machines and tubes. Marcus and Victoria were there, sitting by my bed, looking exhausted and worried. "Dad," Victoria said when she saw my eyes open. "Oh, thank God. We thought we'd lost you." "How long have you been here?" I asked weakly. "Since they called us," Marcus said. "We haven't left the hospital. They stayed with me for the entire week I was hospitalized. They took turns sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by my bed. They talked to my doctors, asked questions about my treatment, made sure I was getting the best possible care. When I was discharged back to Sunset Manor, they helped me get settled. Marcus brought me books from my old house, books I'd mentioned missing during one of our dinner conversations. Victoria brought photos of Eleanor that she'd had professionally restored and framed. "We should have done this years ago," she said as she hung the photos on my wall. "Mum should have been here with you all along." For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt like I had a family again, but I also knew my time was limited. The heart attack had been severe, and my doctors were honest about my prognosis. I had maybe 6 months, maybe a year if I was lucky. I decided to tell Marcus and Victoria the truth about my financial situation. "There's something I need to discuss with you both," I said during one of our weekly dinners. "Something about my estate." They both tensed up, probably expecting bad news about medical bills or care costs. "I haven't been entirely honest with you about my finances," I continued. "Dad, if you're worried about money, don't be," Marcus said quickly. "We'll figure out a way to cover whatever you need." "That's not what I mean." I took a deep breath. When I sold the company, I didn't just put the money in a savings account. I invested it, very successfully. They looked confused. "How successfully?" Victoria asked. $47 million, successfully. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's fork clattered to his plate. Victoria's mouth fell open. $47 million, Marcus whispered. I nodded. "I've been managing a stock portfolio for the past few years. It's done very well." But you're living here," Victoria stammered. "You're on a fixed income. You told us you couldn't afford to stay in the house." "I never told you I couldn't afford it. You assumed I couldn't afford it. You wanted me out of the house, so you convinced yourselves and tried to convince me that I had no other choice." They stared at me, trying to process this information. "All this time," Marcus said slowly, "you've been a millionaire, yes. And you let us think you were broke, yes. Why?" Victoria asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing left to give you." I wanted to know if you loved me or if you just loved my money. The truth hung in the air between us like a physical presence. And what did you discover? Marcus asked. Initially, that you loved the money. You abandoned me the moment you thought I was no longer useful to you. You moved me here and then disappeared from my life completely. Victoria started crying. Dad, we're so sorry. We were horrible to you. Yes, you were. But you've also proven that you can change. These past few months, you've shown me the people I always hoped you could be. You've been present, caring, attentive. You've treated me like your father instead of an inconvenience. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now you inherit $2 million each when I die. They both stared at me. $2 million, Victoria said. But you said you have $47 million. I do. The rest is going to charity. To establish a foundation in your mother's name that will help other elderly people avoid the kind of treatment you initially gave me. I watched their faces carefully, looking for signs of anger or greed or resentment. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected. Relief. That's actually perfect, Marcus said quietly. It is, I asked, surprised. Dad, we don't deserve $47 million, Victoria said through her tears. We don't deserve anything after the way we treated you. The fact that you're leaving us anything at all is more generous than we have any right to expect. And honestly, Marcus added, I don't think we could handle that much money responsibly. We've proven that we're not good with money we didn't earn. $2 million each is enough to give us a fresh start, but not enough to ruin our lives. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart medication. These were the children Eleanor and I had tried to raise. They'd been lost for a while, corrupted by privilege and entitlement, but they were finding their way back to the people they were meant to be. There's one more thing, I said. I want you both to be involved with the foundation, not as paid employees, but as volunteers. I want you to help decide how the money gets used to make sure it really makes a difference in people's lives. We'd be honored, Victoria said. It would give us a chance to do something meaningful with our lives, Marcus added, something Mum would be proud of. I lived for another 8 months after that conversation, 8 months of weekly dinners. With my children, of phone calls that weren't about money or problems, of feeling like I was part of a family again. Marcus got his consulting business back on track, but this time he focused on helping small businesses instead of just chasing big corporate contracts. He found that he actually enjoyed the work when it wasn't just about making money. Victoria left Bradley and moved into a small apartment near Sunset Manor so she could visit me more often. She started volunteering at a local women's shelter, using her organizational skills to help other women rebuild their lives after divorce. Both of them spent time getting to know my friends at Sunset Manor. They brought Agnes flowers every week. They played cards with Frank and listened to his stories about his teaching career. They helped Dorothy write letters to her grandchildren. They became part of the community I'd found when they'd abandoned me. They saw firsthand how much these people meant to me and how much I meant to them. When I finally passed away peacefully in my sleep on a Tuesday morning in March, Marcus and Victoria were there. So were Agnes, Frank, Dorothy, James, and Jessica. My room was full of people who loved me, some by blood, some by choice, but all genuinely. The will reading was held the following week in Tom Brennan's office. Marcus and Victoria sat quietly as he read through the document, outlining their inheritance and the establishment of the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation. When he finished, he pulled out the letter I'd written months earlier. Your father asked me to read this aloud, he said. To my children, Marcus and Victoria, he began. If you're hearing this letter, it means I'm gone, and it means you've learned about the money you didn't inherit. I hope you understand that this isn't about punishment. It's about love. Real love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give. For too many years, our relationship was about what you could get from me. Money, connections, security, comfort. You took everything I offered and never learned to give anything back. But in my final months, you showed me that you could change. You gave me your time, your attention, your presence. You gave me the gift of feeling loved and valued, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The $2 million you're inheriting isn't a consolation prize. It's a recognition that you've become the people your mother and I always hoped you could be. Use it wisely. Use it to build lives you can be proud of. The foundation will be my lasting legacy, but you are Eleanor's legacy and mine. The way you live your lives, the way you treat other people, the way you choose love over greed, that's how you honor our memory. I forgive you for the years of neglect and selfishness. More importantly, I hope you've learned to forgive yourselves and to do better going forward. Take care of each other. Take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. And remember that the most valuable inheritance I can leave you isn't money. It's the knowledge that you're capable of being better than you were. I love you both. I'm proud of who you've become. Make your mother proud too. When Tom finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Marcus and Victoria were sobbing, but they were also smiling. He was right, Victoria said through her tears. About everything. We were awful people, and he gave us a chance to become better. The foundation is going to help so many people, Marcus added. People like the friends he made at Sunset Manor. People who deserve dignity and respect in their final years. They kept their promise. The Eleanor Whitmore Foundation has helped thousands of elderly people over the past 5 years. It's funded improvements to nursing homes, provided financial assistance to families struggling with care costs, and advocated for better treatment of elderly people across the country. Marcus and Victoria work tirelessly for the foundation, not because they're paid to, but because they believe in its mission. They've found purpose and meaning in their lives that they never had when they were just living off their father's money. They still visit Sunset Manor regularly, checking on the friends I left behind. Agnes is still there, now 97, and still sharp as a tack. Frank passed away 2 years ago, but not before seeing his grandson graduate from college with help from the Foundation's scholarship program. Dorothy moved back to California to live with her daughter, but she sends Christmas cards every year. The staff at Sunset Manor remember me fondly, not as the rich man who secretly helped their residents, but as the kind gentleman who treated everyone with respect and dignity. My story isn't really about money, though money played a central role. It's about the difference between being loved for what you have and being loved for who you are. It's about the power of second chances and the possibility of redemption. My children learned that love can't be bought, but it can be earned. They learned that family isn't about blood or inheritance. It's about showing up, being present, and caring about someone else's well-being more than your own convenience. They learned that the most valuable things in life, love, respect, dignity, purpose, can't be inherited. They have to be earned every single day through your actions and your choices in the end. I got what I wanted most. I got to see my children become the people Eleanor and I had always hoped they could be. I got to feel loved and valued in my final months. I got to make a difference in the lives of people who had shown me kindness when my own family had abandoned me. And I got to leave behind a legacy that will help other elderly people avoid the loneliness and abandonment I experienced. The Eleanor Whitmore Foundation ensures that no one has to choose between dignity and affordability in their final years. Marcus and Victoria lost $45 million, but they gained something much more valuable. They gained their souls back. They learned to love without expecting anything in return. They learned to give instead of just taking. They learned that the richest inheritance isn't money. It's the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you've become. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd told them about the money from the beginning. Would they have treated me better if they'd known I was wealthy? Would they have visited more often, called more frequently, shown more interest in my well-being? Probably, but that kindness would have been motivated by greed, not love. It would have been an investment in their future inheritance, not genuine care for their father. By hiding my wealth, I forced them to confront who they really were when they thought they had nothing to gain from me. And yes, initially, they failed that test spectacularly. But they also proved that people can change, that it's never too late to become better than you were. The state investigation into elder abuse was quietly dropped after I made it clear that I didn't want to pursue charges. Marcus and Victoria's reputations recovered, though they both learned valuable lessons about how quickly a life built on appearances and entitlement can crumble. Marcus's new consulting business is thriving, but for different reasons than before. Instead of trading on his father's name and connections, he's built a reputation for integrity and genuine expertise. His clients respect him for his work, not his pedigree. Victoria never remarried, but she's happier than she ever was with Bradley. She discovered that she's actually quite capable when she's not relying on someone else's money. She manages the day-to-day operations of the foundation with skill and passion, and she's become an advocate for elderly rights in our state. Both of them live modestly now, not because they have to, but because they've learned the difference between wanting something and needing it. They've discovered that happiness doesn't come from accumulating possessions or impressing other people. It comes from making a meaningful contribution to the world. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to teach my children about love and family, I ended up learning those lessons myself. The residents and staff at Sunset Manor showed me more genuine affection in a few months than I'd felt in years. They proved that family isn't just about who shares your DNA, it's about who shows up when you need them most. Agnes, Frank, Dorothy, James, and the others didn't love me because I was rich. They didn't even know I was rich. They loved me because I listened to their stories, because I treated them with respect, because I saw them as whole people rather than just elderly patients warehoused in a facility. In return, they gave me something I'd been missing since Eleanor died. They gave me a sense of belonging, of being valued, of mattering to someone. When I think about my legacy now, I don't think about the business I built or the money I accumulated. I think about the foundation that will help thousands of elderly people maintain their dignity in their final years. I think about my children, who learned to choose love over greed and purpose over profit. But mostly, I think about the lesson that took me 78 years to fully understand, that the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. Not just money, though that matters too, but time, attention, kindness, respect. The residents at Sunset Manor taught me that every person has value, regardless of their age or health or financial situation. They taught me that loneliness is one of the cruelest forms of poverty, and that sometimes the most generous thing you can give someone is simply your presence. My children taught me that it's never too late for redemption, that people can change. If they're given the right motivation and the right opportunities. They taught me that love is stronger than disappointment, and that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as the person you're forgiving. Eleanor, even in death, taught me that the love you build with someone doesn't end when they're gone. It transforms into something that can guide and inspire you for the rest of your life. The foundation bears her name because she would have loved its mission, but more than that, because she taught me that caring for others is the highest calling any of us can have. If you're reading this story and you have elderly parents or grandparents, please don't wait until it's too late to show them you care. Don't assume they know you love them. Show them. Visit them. Call them. Ask about their lives and actually listen to the answers. Don't treat them like burdens to be managed or problems to be solved. Treat them like the complex, interesting, valuable people they are. They have stories to tell, wisdom to share, love to give, if you're willing to receive it. And if you're someone who's facing the prospect of aging yourself, remember that your worth isn't determined by your productivity or your independence or your financial resources. You matter because you're human, because you've lived a life full of experiences and relationships and lessons learned. Don't let anyone convince you that you're disposable just because you're old. Don't let anyone warehouse you somewhere and forget about you. Demand the respect and dignity you deserve. And don't be afraid to fight for it. The Eleanor Whitmore Foundation continues to grow and expand its mission. Last year, we helped over 3,000 elderly people access better care, funded improvements to dozens of facilities, and provided scholarships to young people pursuing careers in geriatric care. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. The real impact is in the individual lives that have been changed. The grandmother who can now afford her medications. The grandfather who was moved from a substandard facility to one that treats him with dignity. The elderly couple who can stay together instead of being separated because of financial constraints. Every person we help is someone's parent, grandparent, spouse, or friend. Every person we help matters to someone, and they should matter to all of us. Marcus and Victoria understand this now in a way they never did before. They've seen firsthand how quickly any of us can go from being independent and self-sufficient to needing help and care. They've learned that aging isn't a failure or a weakness. It's a privilege that not everyone gets to experience. Asterisk. They've also learned that wealth without purpose is meaningless, that privilege without responsibility is destructive, and that love without action is just empty words. I'm proud of who they've become. I'm proud of the work they're doing. I'm proud that they've chosen to honor their mother's memory and my legacy by dedicating their lives to helping others. But I'm most proud that they've learned to be happy with enough instead of always wanting more. They've learned that the best inheritance you can leave your children isn't money. It's the example of how to live a meaningful life. As I finish telling this story, I want you to remember that it's not really about the money. The $47 million was just a plot device, a way to reveal character and motivate change. The real story is about love and family, and the choices we make about how to treat each other. It's about the difference between being alone and being lonely, between being cared for and being loved. It's about the fact that we all have the power to choose who we want to be, regardless of how we've behaved in the past. It's about the possibility of redemption and the importance of second chances. It's about the truth that the most valuable things in life, love, respect, dignity, purpose, connection, can't be bought or sold or inherited. They can only be earned through our actions and our choices day after day, year after year. My children threw me away when they thought I was worthless, and they discovered I was worth $47 million. But the real discovery wasn't about money, it was about the fact that every human being has inherent worth that has nothing to do with their bank account. I hope they never forget that lesson. I hope you never forget it either, because in the end, we're all worth more than we know, and we all deserve to be loved not for what we have, but for who we are. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving behind. That's the legacy that will outlast any amount of money, and that's a lesson worth $47 million or more.